All right, Jay and Dave Sports Bar is back for yet another episode. It is Air Force Week for the Boise State football team. I feel like they should actually schedule this game more around Halloween, kind of a spooky matchup. It always seems to kind of get inside the heads of Boise State fans.
It used to always be like November, right? For the most part,
it used to be a little bit later, yeah.
But it would make a lot of sense for Air Force just because it just has this stigma to it.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, when they beat Boise State in Harson's first 3 years.
Right.
No school had beat Boise State three years in a row in 20 years. It was Nevada in the late 90s was the only one.
You kind of,
most recent.
As you go back and you recap and you research like the past games and stuff like that, I stumbled upon the fact that, Air Force did beat Boise State 3 straight times. But I still almost don't believe it. Like I still had to double check it to the day because that just doesn't happen to Boise State very often. I mean, they don't get beat very often, let alone beaten by the same team 3 years in a row. This will always be a game that has a little extra to it just because of that fact.
And there was, of course, the year in 2015 when them and New Mexico both won on the blue, running option-based systems. And I think a lot of people get, like you said, kind of spooked out about it. They should wear the orange helmets or the black helmets with the orange face masks or whatever, right? But no, but the funny thing is at least in my opinion, recently, those offenses haven't been as scary. Playing those teams creates a different atmosphere because of that, though. The time of possession and all that stuff. That's the thing that's important. It's not necessarily like, oh man, we're just getting gashed by the option. It's had success against Boise State, but not. That hasn't been why they've lost. I'm
actually glad that you brought that up because you're exactly right. That it does kind of come down to time of possession and converting on third downs and all of that stuff. And with Air Force, that really is the battle within the battle. That means so much in this matchup. And you have an Air Force team that the last 3 years has ranked in the top 10 in the country in time of possession. This year they're 23rd, but they're still possessing the ball for well more than half the game than their opposition. So those are things. And I don't care, Dave. Going back and looking at it, Boise State's defense has been on the field for 40 drives this year. Guess how many of those possessions have lasted longer than 4 minutes?
2?
2.
Hey.
Exactly. Yeah. 2. So 2 out of the 40 defensive stands that Boise State has had to make, they have had to be on the field for longer than 4 minutes. Yeah. And I'm just throwing 4 minutes out there. That's neither here nor there. That's just it seems like a good amount of time to be on the field. Air Force will test you so much more than that. Better than anybody. Last week, they had a drive though. They had a drive where they only went 51 yards. And it lasted over 8 minutes and 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think they ended with a field goal. Right?
And it ended with a field goal. But, I'm just saying, that this offense that Air Force is going to throw at you, yes, they are explosive. Yes, they can beat you in that way. But they are going to test you mentally and physically by seeing how much you can take by staying on the field for at least a couple of these drives a game.
Yeah,
they're going to hit a couple of explosive drives, but they're also going to have a couple of drives where they leave that defense out on the field for 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes maybe.
Yeah, Boise State hasn't had to deal with it. So that's again, one of those early season things where you're like, well, they haven't seen it yet, so how are they going to handle it?
Right.
We can't say for sure at this point.
I think that as impressive as this defense has been so far, that is one of my biggest questions going into this game. Can they sustain a couple of those drives?
And I know also too, with a new DC, because they were like, well, Andy the last couple of years has done a good job against it, which he had, and Schmedding, has he had much experience with it? Well, he does have a little bit with Cal Poly, and it's not the same thing, but at least he's at least had to prep for an option sort of team before. This is not completely new to him. It was completely new to Colorado. Hadn't played against an option team in 25 years.
Is that how long it had been?
Yeah, since basically, if you want to count like the Nebraska teams of, around, 93, 94 range, they probably hadn't had to play anybody like that, and they haven't in that long. So I think that, for sure, at least for an FBS team. So
I think a reason why, Air Force are facing the triple option is difficult too. It's not only their ability to kind of stay on track, but we just witnessed Curtis Weaver have 4 sacks in a single game against Portland State. When you get those negative plays, tackles for loss, sacks, they create energy for the rest of your defense and the rest of your team to feed off of.
Yeah.
Against Air Force, those are nearly impossible plays to create. They're giving up a negative play once every 26 snaps this year. that's like once or twice, or wait, 2 or 3 times a game, you're just not going to be able to create that energy that you get from, Curtis Weaver getting 4 sacks in a game against Portland State last week. So that's why those drives are so hard to, sustain too, or keep them off the field or keep points off the board.
And I think too, that's interesting with Air Force, with their quarterback that they have this year, being able to, if you do get him in a negative situation, again, I have to keep reliving the Colorado loss to Air Force this week, but they had situations where they would be in a 3rd and 11 or something like that, and he would hit a 12-yard pass. He's a pretty good passer, so it's not like, even if you get them in those situations, usually that was the perfect situation against a team like Air Force. They have a good enough quarterback who can throw, where if they get caught in there, they're not completely dead.
For me, I don't know how much or how many times I've been able to watch the entire game of a Boise State opponent the week before they play Boise State. Yep. You had to live that last week with them taking on Colorado. Right. I am curious to see what their quarterback is capable of doing, because I think there is a lot of talk this year that he can wing it a little bit. Yeah. And from my understanding, it isn't just like the boomer bust type plays either. Like sometimes in years past, Boise State has been burnt deep because everybody's sucking up and focusing on the run and they hit him over the top. But this guy actually has a little bit of an intermediate passing game, which I think now that offense really grows to another dimension when you can consider that. Yeah,
he threw 2 touchdowns that were deep balls that were pretty similar, and that got CU. But also there were situations. I remember one, and I mentioned it was like a 3rd and 11. He hit Wagasbeck, the tight end, on like a 12-yard pass. He was just wide open over in the middle. And it was out of the shotgun, so it kind of looked almost like a spread play. Yeah. You know what I mean? He wasn't in the flex bone or anything like that. So it'll be interesting, because him and the quarterback didn't play against Boise State last year. He was hurt for, I think he missed 2 games last year, and one of the 2 was Boise State.
And they still put 38 on the board.
They did, right? And so it's very intriguing to see what he's going to be able to do. He's a really talented kid and stuff like that, and I think that Boise State has at times struggled when they pass. Was it Carson Roberts? Was that the quarterback in 15 when they completed like 30 yards a pass? I mean, we've seen it here before. So that's what's so interesting about this game. It's so unknown, is you just kind of look at the talent level or whoever's coming back and all that stuff, and you just think, well, yeah, Boise State's got this one probably. When it's Air Force, you have no idea.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I really do kind of feel like that's the case. Another thing, though, that I definitely will acknowledge as we kind of talk with players and coaches throughout the week, I'm not saying that in 14, 15, and 16, Boise State was necessarily overlooking Air Force State. Is Air Force a state?
Portland's not.
Yeah, Portland's not. Where were those signs last week, people? I'm not saying that Boise State was necessarily overlooking Air Force, but nowadays, like, Air Force has Boise State's 100% attention. There is nothing like there's zero like what's going on next week. It's a bye. Air Force has Boise State's attention now, no doubt.
And it's become part of the routine for them. We'll see in spring ball.
Yep.
We'll see in spring ball at least one day, maybe 2 even, that they run some of those concepts and get prepared for the veer blocking, some of the cut blocks and that stuff, and with the option. And then I think they told us they had 2 days in fall camp where they worked on it. They're trying their best right now to simulate it, which is almost impossible, of course. I know Zach Matlock is kind of running the scout as the scout quarterback, and he's a guy who's a little bit mobile. So, but there's only so much you can do. But they do make it something where, frankly, maybe even in January, but at least in like March, they're already starting to think about it.
Right. That's another really good point, Dave. Is that this is part of their routine now. This is something they incorporate in off season, in the preseason, and obviously during the regular season. Shifting our focus ever so slightly to Boise State now and looking at this matchup.
Can I stop you real quick before we get to that? I mentioned Portland State. Eric Keisau told us that story today, and it was hilarious. I have to just add.
No, it was
because you mentioned Curtis Weaver.
Weaver, 4 sacks, and we all kind of were up in the press box, and we all kind of knew that it's the first time since 1996 that a Boise State individual had 4 sacks in a game, and it was Chris Wing. And I stopped the story there, Dave, but it went further today.
Well, and it went only slightly further in that it was against Portland State.
Yes,
and we were like, oh, the irony, huh? Right, and then today I kind of asked him when we were done, and I said, hey, what was it like playing against Portland State? And then he goes, that game where Chris Wing had all those sacks? That was me. And we were all like, oh my God, it just dawned on all of us
I don't know why.
At the same time.
Like we talked about it on the pregame show that Eric Keisau played at Portland State and like all of this. And I think the reason why is we're so caught up in what Curtis was doing. It was nuts.
Sure.
And we already had like the similarity with it. It was last time it happened was against Portland State. So there you're like, oh, we've connected the dots.
Yeah.
And then as you mentioned, chatting with Eric Keisau today, he unveils this other layer to the story. And it goes even further than this though.
Just basically that Chris Wing was killing him off the left side, and they made an adjustment to put like 2 tight ends on that side, and he said like first snap he sees Chris Wing coming from his right.
Right. Yeah. so Chris Wing is coming off one side. They go into halftime. They think they got to figure it out, so they put an extra blocker over there, and then Chris Wing lines up on the opposite side of the defensive line. That was an awesome story.
It was a good story when he said that, like right when he got hired.
Yeah.
That Chris Wing was, who obviously still around town and stuff. He'd come in the facility and met him, and he kind of like said he like gave him a hug, and I wouldn't say it gave him like PTSD, but I think the way he described it was that he was basically like, oh, you're the little guy that I was after.
Keisau also told us today that he was sacked 69 times in one season.
That number, like what was Deshaun Watson last year?
And they play a longer season,
longer,
but it was upwards of that.
His number was insane.
Yeah.
I want to say it was low 60s.
I think it was in the 60s. 63 stands out, but I don't know.
Right, not top of our heads.
Yeah.
Let's pretend we're right.
63.
Yeah, and but back then, dude, they didn't play 12 games.
Right.
I think he played 11.
I mean he's getting taken down like six, 7 times a game. Yeah.
That is... I'm glad he's still walking.
We need to ask Key what happened with you guys need to incorporate a run game or something.
Right.
Keep some pressure off the quarterback.
Can you guys just do like the toss offense? Like,
this is actually a great segue because speaking of quarterbacks that are getting hit, I feel like this is one of like the hot topic discussions on Twitter right now, and how much Hank Bachmeier, Boise State's true freshman quarterback, is getting hit. Now, Eric Keisau had a glowing review of Hank Bachmeier today. He said that what he's doing back there is unbelievable, and then he backed it up again and reiterated, truly unbelievable, because as we just found out, Keisau got hit a lot when he's playing quarterback in college, but Hank's ability to bounce back and be productive is something that makes him so unique. So I guess where I'd like to start this discussion, Dave, is what is your take on how much Hank is getting hit?
It is a concern, and it should be for Boise State for a couple of reasons. One, the offensive line when we went into this season, I think everyone was like, well, talent-wise, experience-wise, they should probably be a strength of the team. Mm-hmm. And there has been that bugaboo of it in 3 straight years.
Big bugaboo.
Of it being them struggling in September. Mm-hmm. And everyone thought, well, maybe that'll stop. Mm-hmm. Florida State, Hank gets hit a lot, gets sacked 5 times. Well, maybe then that we'll chalk it up to be at Florida State. Mm-hmm. Then it happened against Marshall. Then it happened against an FCS team. That has become a bit of a trend. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's a couple. I mean, it is a couple things. It's Bachmeier holding on the ball a bit too long. Mm-hmm. It's maybe running backs not necessarily getting in there to chip somebody or to pick up a blitz. And then it's also on the offensive line, and it has to be. I mean, I would say mostly, but not 100% on the O-line. But I think that
and I guess that's my point, though, Dave, is that I've had a lot of feedback on Twitter talking about the offensive line, and they are not. I'm no way trying to say they're innocent in this whole matter. No, but. It to me it's just kind of like a response of how if Boise State doesn't score enough points on offense, that you have people that are like, oh, unimaginative on offense, they weren't creative,
bad play calling,
bad play calling. It's just kind of like those things. When really it's probably just like a lack of execution and things like that. It's not necessarily bad play calling, but I just think like it's such like an easy crutch to lean on. Like, oh yeah, the offensive line's been terrible, but. Man,
that was something that came up a lot when Scott Huff was here. Uh-huh. It was almost every year.
Yeah.
So anyway.
True. I see where you're going there.
Right.
But part of it is Hank is a guy, and we've seen it a number of times, that he does like to hang on to the ball a little bit and try to deliver on some big plays. Now there is some payoff here. There truly is. Hank has completed 19 passes of 20 or more yards this year. Okay, just to give you some perspective on that number, and I'm not saying we're going to get into Mountain West play and those numbers aren't going to be sustainable, week in and week out until we get to the end of the regular season. But just to show you where he's at right now, 19 plays of 20 or more yards this season. He's on pace for 82. Last year, Tua, down in Alabama, he led the FBS with 72. Mm-hmm. So by hanging in there a little bit longer, you are, extending these opportunities to get big plays and deliver. And Hank, while he's taking some shots, is delivering. So there is some trade-off there, and I do think there's some productive trade-off there.
Right.
But I guess, I think you just hear so much about something and you're like, gosh, this is just such a negative thing. Like, there's got to be something more to it. And
right.
so that, I think, is the something more to it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that is true. And I think that's a very solid point. I think also at the same time, the offensive line has to get better.
Yep.
They just do.
I do.
And is, again, people ask me this question during the summer. When you saw the second team offensive line in the spring game, it probably instilled no faith in you. Right?
I would agree.
They weren't very good.
At the very least, what you're saying is, wow, there is a drop-off between the ones and the twos, and if any of those ones go down, there's reason for concern.
Yeah, and guess what? We've already seen 3 of those second-team guys start games.
Yep.
So that's, again, a factor. Again, you could, as with when we talk about the attendance thing, you can always go the other way. Mm-hmm. Then the people will say, well, then Bedell should have them ready to start. Okay? Fair.
Yeah.
But you can
only do so much, though. You need playing time, right?
Think about your own job. Like, if for some reason you couldn't do it, like, should you just assume that the guy behind you is going to be just as good? Mm-hmm. You probably don't.
Agreed.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but I do think that it's a concern. It's an issue. They've given up 11 sacks, and then however many more hits, whatever statistic you want to use. I know at The Athletic, the one that we use doesn't really track quarterback hits, but the one that ESPN gave out said that he's been hit more than anybody else. Mm-hmm. Whatever metric you're using, and people see with their own eyes, whether he is or not, he's definitely up there. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an issue, whether we want to talk about injuries, turnovers, potential big plays, third downs, all that stuff.
Yeah.
All those things factor into that. That number has to be cut down because that eventually could really come and bite him.
Right. And I guess, that's why I feel like Boise State still clearly has some trust at this point, because I'll go back to that long throw that he made. Bachmeier's backed up in his own end zone, and he takes a shot on the play. He actually got hit in the end zone, but he got rid of it, and he delivers this beautiful pass to John Hightower out near midfield down the left sideline. And you're kind of like, there's a moment there you're like, this isn't going to end well. And then he was able to deliver on that pass despite getting hit, and it did end well. But I just by simply calling that play, though, Boise State is still clearly has trust that things are going to work themselves out, or that Bachmeier is going to be able to handle the situation. And
that's what you want. If they're going to go all in with a true freshman, you might as well uncork them. You know what I mean? Don't just sit there and kid glove them. Let them go. Mm-hmm. And that's what they have done.
They have absolutely done
and they have done that, right? And that's 3 games in. And even getting Chase in there in the last game. If they were playing Air Force last week, I don't think we would have seen him as much. Mm-hmm. And they would have done it with Hank, and they would have kept him in there and kept him doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. But it's funny. You're talking about these big, long plays. Chad texted me yesterday and sent me a screen grab from when Boise State lost at Air Force in 2016.
Yeah.
The numbers that were in that game were
insane,
stupid.
Yep.
Like Rippins in particular.
Yeah, he had over 300 yards passing on like 9 completions.
Yep, it was. But here's the thing: 9 of 26.
9 of 26
for 316.
That's why.
I do remember covering that game, but I just kind of forgot that, like, anytime they touched the ball
they would basically score
in the air. It was going to be 35 yards. But that's what happens sometimes against Air Force. You know what I mean? Just weird stuff like that you just can't predict.
Right. That's why I do think you have to focus on the things that, like, you feel like you can predict. And we already talked about, like, time of possession and third downs. Like, I think you have to go in preparing to try, like, if not win them, be as close to even as possible, because those are areas that Air Force is so darn good. Like even turnovers, like it's even tough for me to believe that, turnover margin is a huge deal, because Boise State hasn't won a turnover battle yet this season.
Yeah.
They've been even or worse. Even in one game worse than two, they still won. They've also had let their opponent score first in every game so far this season. So they're 3-0 when their opponent scores first. Usually that's a stat that goes the other way.
Like Marshall had that run, right?
Yeah.
Were they 39-1 or something like that?
Yeah, 39-1. Yep. And Boise State became an anomaly for them. But even you go back, again, Dave, to the turnover battle. And that was something, the game that you're talking about, that was a 16 game.
But the 15, Boise State dominated.
Yeah, the 15 game, I'm just looking to make sure I got this right. The 15 game, Boise State was +4 in the turnover battle, and they lost against Air Force. So, like,
at home.
Those are like the quirky, weird things that you can't predict. That's why I think you have to go in and win the areas that you really can predict with the triple option offense. The last one we've yet to talk about is the red zone. Mm-hmm. Boise State slowly but surely getting better and more efficient. They were better against Portland State. The sample size is still too small for me to understand whether this is a good or a bad team in the red zone. I think they need to run the ball better in the red zone. I think that Robert Mahone, as he gets back, missed a majority of that Marshall game with a bum shoulder. I think he can provide a nice presence down there. But Air Force. Okay, another Dave, sometimes this won't surprise you probably. You just stay up at night and you look up stats and you don't even know why. Guess how many times? That's probably.
Watching Kick Grief Junior highlights. And,
oh, wait, you guys don't, everybody doesn't do that? Guess how many times since Boise State joined the Mountain West? Guess how many times? I know. This is one of those rhetorical questions, by the way. Like I don't know. Like I'm asking you. I had no idea. That's why I looked this up.
I guessed well a minute ago.
You did. You guessed really well. Guess how many times Boise State has denied Air Force of points when Air Force has hit the red zone since Boise State returned to the Mountain West?
They only stopped them like once.
0.
Oh, holy crap!
Air Force is 28 for 28 against Boise State in terms of scoring points when they get inside the red zone. 100%. Boise State's still been pretty good. They're at about 80%, but that's a pretty sizable gap. And then you talk about scoring touchdowns. Brian Harsin told us last week they want to score touchdowns 70% of the time they get in the red zone. Against Air Force in that span, they've done it 50% of the time. Air Force is up over 60%. So that is another area where I think it is going to be very critical for Boise State to I don't think I can say not score points, because like you can't predict turnovers and stuff like that, but you got to limit them to 3 as much as you possibly can when they get inside that red zone.
And you have to score.
And Dave,
right.
And I think that's the one thing that, like, the conclusion that I came to out of all this is, like, you can't always dictate what Air Force does. Try to keep them to 3. But you're exactly right, man. Like, if they get in the red zone, that means you better get in the red zone and you better make the most of your opportunities.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of, I mean, you and I sometimes are on the wavelength, and I'm glad that we are on the same one. But you asked Monday, and what I wrote Monday, well, for Tuesday, but I wrote about, the difference in the wins and losses for Boise State under Harsin. First 3, when they lost, red zone, at least once in every game they didn't score.
Wow.
And their third downs were horrific.
Yeah.
Right? The last 2, their third downs have been better than 50% in both of those wins, and they've scored 100% of the time in the red zone.
Yeah. And so you're talking about against Air Force, right?
Yes, Boise State against Air Force.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're Boise State's touchdown rate in those 3 straight losses was like 35% in the red zone.
Right.
I mean, that's bad.
Right.
You can't win against good teams when you do that.
Right. And that's exactly it. Yeah.
And meanwhile, Air Force continues just to cash in.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because if they're going to be able to do that and still get field goals, you have to get a touchdown. You know what I mean? If you're not going to stop them. So I'm very interested in, which is funny, though, because you mentioned how good they are in the red zone. That CU game might not have gone to overtime. They might have, I think Air Force might have not even needed it. At the very end of the first half, they had the ball in the 2. They threw a pick.
Air Force?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So here I'm hyping up the red zone, and they didn't do good in the red zone.
Guess what they did? They threw. Why? No, I was kidding. I mean,
kind of.
I was fine with it at the time.
I mean, what is Kirk Cousins their quarterback? I mean, geez.
Oh man,
Another
ouch.
sensitive subject.
Just stinging all the teams. But like Hammond rolled out and he had like two guys, but he kind of like threw this quick sidearm and neither of them really expected it, and it deflected off of one of them and Onu picked it off.
Yeah.
In the end zone. But that was like, they're really good in the red zone except for like that one time.
That one time.
But that's what I'm saying. If they had scored,
one trip.
again, because they're so good at it, if they had scored, like, and if it just held
Colorado
sway,
might be down by so much that it's not. They can't even try to come back.
Overtime. Yeah. And then when Air Force has you like that, you almost don't have a shot. Because they're going to control the ball.
Well, yeah. Well, here's the deal though, and maybe we are making this way too complicated. Maybe this is really simple because Boise State's going to have a huge competitive advantage this weekend. They're wearing the coolest uniforms in all of college football. Maybe. I don't know, that probably went a little too far there, but they are really cool. I mean, Uniswag listed the all oranges last week as like the fourth coolest. I almost wanted to be like, wait till you see the all blacks this week. Not talking about the rugby team.
Not the rugby team. Actually, I'm wearing Australian rules right now. But I was trying to think, really quick, what is the coolest uniform? Is there somebody that you just think has like a really sick one?
Well, all of UWs are terrible, so let's just get those out of the way.
I really like honestly, and maybe it's just because of like right now where my mind's at. The Air Force one with the
when the military schools they bust out like their alternate looks or something.
Air Force has the one with the shark, like with like the fighter jet thing on the side.
Usually
those are fantastic.
Usually the uniforms that come out around the Army Navy game, in December. Usually those uniforms are like
sick.
the
That's
best.
A great point.
Yeah.
Navy had the one time where it looked like a watercolor of like a ship on the side of it, and you're like, that thing's beautiful.
Unbelievable. Yeah, it's like it was a piece of artwork. This isn't just my opinion, but Washington State's uniforms have actually gotten a lot of publicity over the last year or so.
Because it's anthracite, not charcoal. Yeah. It's not gray. It's anthracite.
It's a little different.
Anyway,
I really do. No, I'm a big fan of the black uniforms. I am. Whatever. Look good, play good. The helmets are probably the coolest part in my opinion.
I think so.
Because they're different. Like if you look close during the game, a lot of people might think they're the stickers. They're not anymore.
They're dipped.
Yeah, they're a dipped chrome. Like it is an actual helmet. There's nothing like stickery about it.
It's not going to peel off. It might chip off.
It might chip off. Right. I kind of wonder what happens. By the way, if that does happen, those are really nice, and I'm assuming really expensive helmets.
They probably don't have a dipping station at the.
I would highly doubt it.
Dale's been around long enough. Maybe they gave him one.
Yeah. Dale just takes a piece of clay and molds it, and it's exactly the same. That's his. He's just a magician in those regards. They're cool. They're cool uniforms. I think the Boise State needs to be on alert this weekend. If I'm being honest, I really do. I think this is going to be a tough game for the Broncos.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm not predicting they're going to lose, but I think this is going to be a tough game for Boise State.
I think if they win, they're going to win by 10-14.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But even like part of that scoring, I think just kind of comes late. Like
Sure.
I think this game goes into the fourth quarter where where it's either close or Boise State is doing whatever they can to try to put this thing away.
Last year,
so they'll blow them out.
Yeah, definitely. Last year, they were winning by 3, and then Hightower scored with a couple minutes left. So it's a 10-point win.
Yep.
That very well could happen again. And I think that's what's interesting is like not that anyone ever overlooks Air Force, but I think on the national scale is like. I think if Air Force hadn't beaten Colorado, it would be a double-digit game in terms of the line. Agreed. I thought, after that Florida State game, that Boise State was going to be double-digit favorites the rest of the way. But now there's Air Force obviously isn't. BYU won't.
Especially down there.
Yeah, and so that's the schedule now is kind of stacking up a little more daunting than I thought it was 2 weeks ago. But Air Force obviously being one of the major ones.
And this does. If Boise State can navigate it, it plays into their favor. That's a big if. Yes. But if they can navigate it, it definitely plays into their favor.
For sure. I totally agree with that.
The Mountain West has done some heavy lifting this preseason or during the non-conference, and I actually appreciated Curtis Weaver's honesty after the game when he was asked about Air Force, and he was like, well, actually, I'll congratulate a Mountain West team if they beat a non-conference Power 5 school, because that's better for us. It is.
Yeah.
It is. Now there won't be any of those hugs and handshakes until after the game this week.
Right.
But it definitely elevates the Mountain West and makes them look good and gives Boise State a chance of another quality win. Because now, at the end of the year, if Boise State beats Air Force, it's not that they just beat Air Force, but people give them credit like, oh, they also kind of in a way beat Colorado.
And it might have, who knows, in the end, it might be an 8 or 9 win Air Force team.
Mm-hmm.
We won't know because they're playing in September and not November.
But you brought that up, Dave. I just want to point out that Marshall played great this last week.
Yeah. Ohio's a good team.
And Ohio is a good team. I think Ohio actually might be picked to win the MAC.
They should be. I think so. And that was a close game. It was a close game that they won. But looking at that schedule, and you kind of mentioned it, I think when we initially saw the schedule and we thought Air Force might be a little bit rebuilding, and then Wyoming, Hawaii, the teams coming in here, you kind of were like, nah.
No, Hawaii. Well, Hawaii, you always thought, hey, at least we got Rolo.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But now they have 2 Pac-12 wins, so you kind of are a little more jacked up about that matchup.
Yeah, that one, and Wyoming, which maybe wouldn't have been allowed to play here if they had lost to Idaho. But they did beat Idaho.
Right. You know what? You know how I
they
view
beat
this?
Missouri too. So
this is how I view this. My dad was a very competitive athlete back in his heyday, and I kind of view Boise State this way, except they don't age like old men. They just kind of always stay relevant. Sorry, Dad.
Sorry, Kim.
It's kind of like the first time you beat your dad in a game, right? And then he kind of lets you hang around, and then you beat him, and then he just crushes you for the next week every time you play him in anything. Yeah, that's kind of Boise State with any other Mountain West school. It's sorry, but it's like the son upsets the dad,
sure.
And then the dad forever is just okay, well now I'm just going to try to murder you in everything you do. Murder, man, it's a little too harsh of a word there, but you know what I mean, though?
It's like when I still, now I can outdrive my dad.
Yeah.
And I feel so He-Man-like. At the end, you're looking at the scorecard, you're like, how the hell did this happen?
It still beat me by 15 strokes.
Exactly, right.
But I don't know, that's just, whenever Boise State gets beat, that's just kind of how I view it, because it doesn't take a lot to get their attention, but it is what it is, man. They always win 10 games, which means they seldom lose very often. And if you are one of the teams that beat them, I mean, Wyoming beat them, what was it, 2 or 3 years ago now?
16.
Yeah. Okay, so this will be the third year but it's almost like that's still relevant though in Boise State's minds, you know, or definitely the fan base's minds.
Yeah.
So that's why. And another reason why Air Force is so relevant this week, and the sting of those 3 straight losses is still there, and we'll see if Dad gets on the pickup court or whatever it is, and buries his kid by 20. I don't know. I remember
after Boise State first played Air Force, remember it was the divisions, at least when they first started playing, weren't in place. I remember they first played, and I remember Chris Peterson was like, thank God we don't have to play them every year. And then they created the divisions, then the divisions. I never quite got his exact response, but I'm sure his exact response was awesome.
I think his response was, I'm leaving the league.
Yeah, exactly.
Not the sole reason.
Looking to the exits.
Yeah. I do remember that first matchup back in 2011, though, when Boise State was so... they had a really good team that year, and you kind of thought that Air Force would come in here, and it was like, oh, cool, they're playing Air Force again. They'll still probably steamroll them, and that was a long afternoon. It was warm.
Yeah. Barnhout had 20 tackles.
Yeah, he did.
I think Danny Goodale hit a field goal. It's put him up by 9 to make it so Air Force wasn't going to come back.
But it was it was. I just remember that going into the fourth quarter of that game, being like, wow, this was way closer than anybody expected. Yeah. So it just kind of was a tone setter of what this series would become.
Yeah.
What do you have
also,
coming up this week?
Real quick.
Yeah.
The quarterback in that game for Boise State, he's doing good things.
He's okay. The Kellen Moore kid.
Give him a quick shout out.
Yeah.
There was actually a story in The Athletic today where they talked to his former coaches, so Harsin, Peterson, Brent Pease, the first quarterbacks coach he had in Detroit, and Kellen himself just a little bit today. And so check that out. I'm eventually going to be doing a story on Kellen. I've been cracking on one for a bit. And so soon, I'll have something coming in The Athletic.
Okay.
I got my mailbag coming tomorrow morning, so Thursday, just answering people's questions. Got some good ones. I got A lot of ones about the O-line.
See?
Big shock.
Big
right?
shock.
And then kicking around some stuff for the bye week that I hope will be good and doable. Sometimes you just need people to comply or respond to you, and so yeah.
We'll see how it works.
Best intentions, right? But I think there's good stuff on the around the horizon. So.
Good. Yeah, we look forward to that. When it comes to Kellen, I'll preface this by saying Rex Ryan knows more about football than I could ever pretend to even maybe know. But I'm watching NFL Countdown on Sunday, and he was a little upset with how much credit Kellen Moore's getting for being this next boy wonder genius.
Oh,
and
really?
He should be a head coach and all this. And so he kind of went on like a little rant, like, how about you do it for 4 years, buddy, and then we can talk, or something like that. It was approximately 2 minutes after that it might maybe a little more or less, I don't know. It was still same show and in that same time frame, that he went on to say that the Miami Dolphins would actually play a pretty good game against the New England Patriots, and that even though Miami was embarrassed week 1, this is the NFL, and they will play much better. And so to recap that, the Dolphins lost 43-0. And the Cowboys put up over 30 points on offense for the second week in a row.
Yeah, and Dak Prescott again looked really, really, really good.
So again, to recap, Rex Ryan knows way more than I do about football, but Kellen Moore just might be for real, buddy.
And he should just put his foot in his mouth.
I don't know if he could. He doesn't look that flexible.
Or someone else's.
Or someone else's.
Thank you. That's a deep dive on Rex Ryan there. But also too, it's a little funny to me when it's like, yeah, see if you can do it for 4 years, buddy. That's not how the NFL works.
That is not.
Yeah. Like Zach Taylor. He's the
Sean
head coach.
McVay.
Yeah, I mean, of course McVay, but Zach Taylor's the head coach for the Bengals now.
I think there's bitterness in the sense that all these young guys on offense can have this like immediate success, and they have these quick rise up the ranks, and they're becoming head coaches. But before they're basically getting their diplomas, almost, they're so young. And on the defensive side, it's just not like that. Like, you have to be the seasoned guy that does do it, seeming to have to do it for like a decade.
Like him, a little bit, like exactly. Vic Fangio in Denver.
Yeah. Well, okay,
which so far hasn't.
He
been
did it
good.
for like 4 decades.
Right. Exactly. Right. But you are right in thinking that. Right. There's like how we always hear about like the new whiz kid offensive mind. When's the last time you heard about this? This defensive genius who's 28 or something. Not very often.
It doesn't happen very often. So I think there's a little bit of bitterness coming from that or stemming from that.
Good call. You know what? We're cracking the case on Rex Ryan.
Yeah. Dave, hey, speaking of cracking the case, I was on Twitter this afternoon, and I saw an instance where Boise State and Central Florida fans got along.
Oh.
It was amazing to me. Couldn't believe it.
Oh, was the Florida State Barstool talking smack to UCF?
Yeah, exactly. So UCF sends out something, and Florida State's Barstool just fires back with, "This is why nobody likes you." And it was at that moment where Boise State and UCF united on a topic. And Boise State was like, "Do we need to come down and help you take care of Big Brother?" Or Little Brother, I think it was, referencing Florida State. And it was just this moment where...
I think the UCF one said, "Don't make us sick Boise State on you," or something like that.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, there was that, and then Boise State chimed in. I just thought I was blown away.
Yeah.
I mean, if those two things can get along, I think we all can get along. Boise State and UCF getting along on the Twitter machine? We're all going to be okay, everybody. Yeah. We're all going to be okay.
Times can be tough. Things can be dark. You can look around and see a lot of sadness. Mm-hmm. But also, if you look just hard enough, you'll find that silver lining. and damn it, Jay did.
What story did you conclude with that on The Athletic?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna take a note real quick and put that on my next one.
Put that down there. Hey, Boise State up to 20 in the rankings. I do want to mention another team that's ranked right now. The College of Idaho picked up a huge victory this last weekend on homecoming in front of over 4,100 fans, taking on another ranked team in Southern Oregon. Now the Yotes are all the way up to 11 in the polls. The Yotes are on a bye this week, so they're guaranteed to go over a calendar year without losing a game. They finished last year on a 6-game winning streak, started this year on a 3-game winning streak. They have a bye this week, so they will go a full year without losing a game. The howl.
The howl is back.
Howl, yes.
Hell yeah.
DJP, Darius James Peterson, 258 passing yards, I think, off the top of my head, something like that. Hunter Juarez. I remember that name because of Aaron Juarez. They just have different first names.
What's the running back? Calzaretta?
Nick Calzaretta, yeah.
He's good too.
Yeah, he's
really
been good too. But Juarez had over 100 yards receiving, like $135, 33, 35, something like that. Calzaretta just continues to churn out yards on the ground. We're really at a point where it's like we almost have to start figuring out postseason plans to cover the Yotes, and it's going to be a fun fall between them, Boise State, and the other teams around the state of Idaho. But yeah. Good discussion, bud. Yeah, it was good. So
Met season finale Monday.
It's been a quick fall. Hopefully it finishes on a good note.
I think next week we'll
bust out the Mets jerseys.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll bust those out and have a few more softball stories for you. Real quick, the Bronco Roundup Game Day Show live on the Blue from 6 to 7 o'clock. We will see you then. We'll see you here, though, next week on Jay and Dave's Sports Bar. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.